All right, so we are live, and I am solo today. Nurse Jessica had her second COVID shot, and that's it's the body aches that poor girl is having right now is just unbelievable. Plus, she's on call tonight, so she won't be, or she's napping as well. So, got the double whammy for today. Now, with that said, we are going to talk about the bowel and bowel movements today and how important. And I'm going to show you ways to, it's called the Bristol stool chart. And I will show you ways that you can look at your bowel movement and try to decide what's going on. And if I have questions on how to fix it, or I shouldn't say fix, but how to help this. And so, well, good morning, Kathy. How are the Kindles doing today? I'm going to take my watch off. I don't like typing and stuff, and my watch rests right on the computer. So the bowel movement. The first thing that we probably should do for the bowel and the bowel movement is actually describe or say what the bowel is. So as I switch over to the iPad screen, as you can see, this is not my drawing. This is something I found on the internet. It is WebMD's. If you go to WebMD, if you go to Google and type in the bowel, this is what will show up. And so when we are seeing this, we can see that, did I not post good morning? I thought I posted good morning back. Did say it. So we start to see the stomach resides up here. And let's change that to a color you can see. The stomach resides up here, and then it dumps into the small intestine. This small intestine, or the bowel in total, if you were to take the bowel and you were to open it up and spread it all out and take all the crypts and things like that and open them up, they would cover the area. Oh, I need a little thicker pen. They would cover the area of a tennis court. So that's what resides inside you. And when you're seeing this and you start to think about it, that's how important it is. That is what absorbs your nutrients. So if you go into the old, or if you Google, what does the bowel do? The first definition you're going to get is it absorbs your nutrients and moves food through. That's the old definition. We now know that this area in here, in the small intestine, has, well, the small and the large intestine both have lots and lots of microvilli, or bacteria in them. And that's why when we start to say, if you've heard of something called SIBO, that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. What does that mean? That means where the small intestine ends and the large intestine begins, right here, we're getting bacteria that are coming into this, and the small intestines are backing up and coming into also the stomach. And that's that dysbiosis that people talk about. And we don't want the contents of the large bowel going into the small bowel, and we don't want the contents of the small bowel going into the stomach. These are all, good morning, Kathy, or sorry, Vicky. Saw Kathy's name first. So this is where we start to see problems with people that get, let's clear everything. And let's go through and fix this all up. And let's say, let's look at this and say, okay, so what are signs and symptoms that we have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? So we're having problems with the bowel. And what we find is that if we have excessive gas, we have bloating, food sits heavy, VY. The food sits heavy. You see undigested food in stool. Still learning my toys. Well, that's not working for me. You get undigested food in the stool. That means that things are moving through too fast, or you don't have enough hydrochloric acid in there. So as we see all of these things happening, we know that there's a problem in the gut. And when there's a problem in the gut, we have to fix that, because when we need to ask the next question, why is the gut important? So don't put you guys on the spot. Kathy, Vicky, who knows why the gut is important other than for absorption and movement of food through the body? Do we have any ideas? Any takers? Somebody type something up. You can do it. So if we look at this and we start to look at the things that the gut actually does that we know now, the enteric nervous system is where the gut goes back to the brain. And when we look at that, let me see if I can pull up a schematic of the enteric nervous system. Gut-brain connection. Yes, that's right, Kathy. The gut-brain connection is the enteric nervous system. And so when you're looking at the enteric nervous system, we start to see how, let's pull this one up. We start to see how these things start to talk. And when we look at how they start to talk, the brain and the body actually speak back and forth more than the spinal cord, and the connections leading out. So as a chiropractor, that's something that is fascinating to me, because there's more connection to the brain and the gut than there is to the spine and the muscles. And so if that doesn't really start to, good health starts in the gut. So Kathy says gut-brain connection, which is the enteric nervous system. And Vicky says good health starts in the gut. And those are both fabulous and correct. And when we look at how the body itself does it, serotonin. So how does the gut affect mood? Your mood is dependent on hormones. Your gut bugs, the bacteria in your gut, are the things that produce those neurotransmitters. And those neurotransmitters are very, very important to your body for all kinds of function, not just mood, but to make your sex hormones, to do all of death begins in the gut is one of our adages. And it's true. If your gut is not in good shape and your gut doesn't move well, then you are not going to absorb. You're going to have malabsorption. You're going to have dysbiosis. You're going to have all of these things that can go wrong. When we want to start to assess the gut without doing a bunch of fancy tests, the first thing that you can do is look at the stool. And so if you're having a bowel movement, I like this. I was doing some research, and this is Jessica Ola's from Very Well. This is her drawing of the Bristol stool chart. And so if you're having severe diarrhea, this is showing that you have a lot of inflammation. And that inflammation, this is inflamed. This is inflamed. This is inflamed. Those types of stools, so if you see the hard little nuggets and they're splotchy or liquid, then your gut is highly inflamed. And you've got to figure out why. Is it dysbiosis? Is it a lack of fiber? So I have all my patients really looking at, do they get enough fiber in? These things are constipation. And so that can be caused because of inflammation, or the body's trying to hold on to the food because there's so much going on that it needs to have more time to hold on to the food so it can digest it. And when we look at severe and mild constipation, these are still things that you need to fix, because you do not want stool sitting in the pipes, because it'll start to eat away at the lining. And if you remember from our leaky gut thing last week, if everything is walled off and everything is moving the way that it should, then everything is going to be absorbed at the proper rate. Everything's going to get into the bloodstream. The body's going to make its hormones and chemicals the way that it's supposed to. So everything is working fabulously. The problem with food sitting in the intestines is it'll start to poke holes in the intestines. And then you start to get leaky gut, which causes all kinds of autoimmune issues. And so you don't want stool. You don't want stool sitting in the gut, because it will rust the pipes or it'll poke holes through there. And this gives the body longer time to absorb what is called LPS, which is a lipopolysaccharide. Those lipopolysaccharides are the things that start to cause autoimmune issues. So you do not want things being held up in there. So what's a normal amount of bowel movements a day? Does anybody know? Come on, Vic. Come on, Kath. You two have chimed up. Keep it going. How many bowel movements are normal in a day? And so as you guys are getting to your keyboards to answer, I will say this, that it does kind of depend on the amount of food that you have eaten. And it also depends on the amount of fiber and also the makeup of what you've done. If you're eating a very high fat diet, that's going to slow things down. If you haven't been eating fiber for a long time and you throw a bunch of fiber in to 2 to 3, yes, you guys are both correct. So Vicky chimed in first with a 2, and Kathy chimes in with 2 or 3. And so those are both correct. And what this does is, as you're bringing food in, you have food exiting, and you want it to look like these. You want it to be sausage shaped, possibly with some cracks in the surface. That's pretty normal. A smooth, soft sausage snake is normal. And you're typically talking in excess of greater than or equal to 30 grams of fiber per day. And I like my patients to have at least 40. If you listen to Dr. Walls, Dr. Walls will talk about, she shoots for 120 grams of fiber a day. Yes, Cindy, one after each meal. And that's typically the way it goes. You get one in, you got one going out. And that's what you want. And you want the stool to look like I said, like these two. As those things, as you get that, the bowel is working and moving well, and you're not holding things up and allowing LPS to be able to sit there in the intestines, poke holes in the intestines, cause leaky gut, and do all those kinds of things. Now, how do we take, if you're sick and you just have diarrhea because you're sick and you're not feeling well, you're fighting off a little bug, what has to happen? Well, this is where most likely you've had a little die-off of bacteria because of whatever illness is hitting. And what we need to do is actually get a little more fiber in as you feel better and better and better. We get more fiber in so that will start to firm up the stool. But you have to have that. I mean, these are the things that are very important, because it's not just having the function and it's not just the process, it's also the timing. And you have to have all of those things so that you do produce your hormones. The enteric nervous system is working well. So if you've ever gotten what they call a nervous stomach, or when you get stressed, what happens when you get stressed? You start to get a little nervous, you get a little anxious, and then what typically comes into play? The next thing that happens is we start to get into food cravings. And why do we get food cravings? Well, those food cravings are just because we have the body's going into its fight or flight response, and it wants to now go in and it wants easy calories because it's getting ready to run, it's getting ready to fight, it's getting ready to flee, roll over, play dead, whatever it is. Your body wants energy. And as it wants energy, it has to have easy calories. And easy calories, can cause you to start to have loose bowels and things like that. And that's why the fiber and all of that stuff is so very important. You want to have those things so that we have proper function, proper timing. And then your hormones start to get made. 90% of your serotonin, which is the feel-good hormone, which also is what helps your body shut down and heal at night, is performed or is done in the gut. And it's done by the gut bugs. And so you have to have all your little gut buddies in line, in place, and doing what they're supposed to do so that you do produce your serotonin, so that you do produce your melatonin, so your immune system is healthy. And that all begins in the gut. It affects your mood. I'm looking at my notes. We want 2 to 3 bowel movements per day, depending on fiber. What should it look like? And covering the enteric nervous system. So I've hit most of my notes that I want to hit. Do you guys have any questions about this so far? And in functional medicine, we start to look at everything and putting it together. And we look at it like we start to look at what are called, let me see if I can find a blank page here to write on. We start to look at what happens with the gut, what are the antecedents, what are the modifiers, what are the triggers. And the funny thing about gut and dementia, I'll come right back to that. I'll put that on the screen so I come back to that. So, well, let's just go with it now. So the gut and dementia, when you are getting inflammation, and so if your bowel movements, if you start to read any studies and look stuff up, people who have diarrhea typically, or dementia patients, Alzheimer's patients, tend to have looser stools. And so when they have those looser stools, then you start the inflammatory process. And remember when we talked last week about the gut and the gut being permeable, when lipopolysaccharides get out into the bloodstream, the things that start to happen to us are things that cause us to get inflamed, and the blood-brain barrier becomes leaky. So then you get inflammation in the brain, and that will augment the blood-brain, or that will augment the dementive type of symptoms. And now there can be vascular dementia, which if you have a leaky gut, the stuff is going into your bloodstream and then it's being circulated around, and it can get to the brain and go into the blood-brain, or go into the brain and cause those issues. You can have toxins. And if your gut isn't working well, then what happens is you can't bind the toxins and pull them out. Your liver gets bogged down. All these types of things happen, and you need to have your gallbladder and its enzymes working so that it stimulates the liver, so that the detoxification type 1 and type 2 are going through the way that they're supposed to go through. And that binds metals and mercury and things like that. And then you release them out the stool. So you have to have those things, or the gut has to be in good shape so that you can do that. You can also have dementia from a high sugar diet, which a high sugar diet increases insulin, which increases inflammation. The high sugar diet also causes the gut to start to be dysbiotic, and that dysbiosis causes you to, so take me for instance, the use of a keto diet for such a long time has caused my gut to be off, and that leads to inflammation. So if I eat a bunch of simple carbs and stuff, I'll start to forget names. And that's because I'm still extremely sensitive to like gluten and those types of things. So there's a very good correlation. I mean, just malabsorption. Even if you're eating it, good cholesterol and good carbs and good fats and good proteins, if you can't break that down, you can't absorb the nutrients in the rest of the bowel anyway. So if you're not absorbing everything in the rest of the bowel anyway, if you're not getting the food to come down into here, and then slowly the body takes its amino acids and the B vitamins and it pulls all those things out as it's traveling through the gut, then you're not going to have the constituents you need to make your hormones. You're not going to have the constituents you need to have a properly functioning immune system. There are all kinds of things there that go wrong. So the dementive component with the gut, that's the first thing. If you read Dr. Bredesen's work on reversing Alzheimer's. The first place he starts to go is to the gut, and he starts to seal the gut up. And if you don't have that intact and you are allowing LPS and you are allowing things to get through the wall that is supposed to protect your body, you're going to have big issues. And it starts with those problems of inflammation, and it starts with those problems of not clearing things out. When you sleep, between the hours of 10 and 2 is when your body produces serotonin, and that's produced in the gut and transformed in the brain, pineal gland, and stuff like that. You get those between the hours of 10 and 2. That's what they call the money time sleep. That's when that happens. And if you're not getting that sleep, you raise cortisol, which makes us increase insulin, which makes us pack on fat, which is pro-inflammatory. You also do not activate the lymphatic clean out. That's where your body comes in and it takes the brain and it starts to open up the areas in between the brain, and it allows for the cleaning, and then that gets taken out through the bloodstream and out the body and excreted, because we can actually measure neurotransmitters in feces, and that's because that's how that's taken out, reconjugated, and moved around. So it's very, very important to have these things straightened out. So if you are having issues with bowel movements, then let me know, because those are the things, or get with, not me, functional medicine doctor. There are more people on here than just my patients. Get with a functional medicine doctor and start to address those. Work with a health coach on your diet so that you're getting things into your system that allow you to build the constituents to be healthy. Those are the things. I mean, I play my part, and we all have to remember, doctors, whether they be medical doctors or whether they be chiropractors or whatever, it used to be there were the medical doctors and then the chiropractors, and we were at odds with each other. And it's not about that anymore. It's about doing what is right for you, the patient. We just had a very interesting case come in, and they did not want their PCP to be notified that they were seeing me. They didn't want to hurt their feelings. And I'm like, I'm not trying to replace that person. I'm trying to help augment what they're doing to help you or to help the patient. And that's what it's all about. We are on team patient. And if we disagree, we disagree. Then okay, educate me. Why? What's going on? And then here's my take on that. And so then it becomes a collaborative discussion on what is best for the patient. And that's what functional medicine is. We're a part of a team. In the overview, we're a part of a team. When we want to really discuss what functional medicine does, functional medicine gets down to these things that says, okay, why is this happening? And how do we fix it? Is this happening because let's go back and let's look at it as what we call ATMs. So if we're going to look at ATMs, these are antecedents, these are triggers, these are mediators. Antecedent is something that you are basically born with. So if your mother's genetics, when we were in utero, let's not make it a you, let's make it an us. So when we're in utero and we see the mom, or I am in Kroger and I see somebody running around and they've got the sides of the cart lined with the Mountain Dews and the Pepsis and the sodas. And this person is large, but they're pregnant. Do you think that has an effect on the baby's genomic expression? Do you think that has an effect on the genes? So what mom is putting into her body is going into the umbilical cord, and that's going to the baby. So we start to see where the babies are predisposed to diabetes, obesity. And we can start to tell by what the mom's blood work looks like when and while she's pregnant as to what the baby's going to look like, or the troubles that the baby's going to have, with pretty scary accuracy, actually. And so this is when it becomes an antecedent. So usually a young child will come in. I had a nursing mother bring her baby in. The baby was colicky and had all kinds of issues with diarrhea, wanted to eat all the time. Okay, so I'm talking to the mom. Okay, what happened? Well, the baby was C-section. So that immediately tells me that the baby was not inoculated with the mother's vaginal and anal bacteria as they came through the birth canal. That tells me that that baby was inoculated by what was ever on the surgeon's hands. And so what's in the hospital? Well, you got a lot of strep, you got a lot of staph, you got a lot of these things. And so then the baby immediately started to have GI issues, wasn't sleeping, wasn't that a failure to thrive, but just was one cranky little dude. And so we started to have, because the mother was nursing, we started to have the mother put some probiotics that are designed for babies on her nipple when she was nursing. And the stool went from this to this. And that was because the bacteria weren't in alignment, and with the mother changing that, and the mother had a good diet. We didn't have to change the mother's diet. This wasn't one of the things where the antecedent was an issue with the mom's diet. The problem was the antecedent was a C-section delivery, that the baby didn't get inoculated correctly. Now, is the baby going to be good from here on out? Don't know. The baby, as this baby gets older, I assume, or I hypothesize, that the child will have an issue with diarrhea if they don't pay attention to what they're eating. If they eat the standard American diet, they're probably going to have a problem, but knowing mom, they're not going to have that. So, that was an easy case that, didn't take any testing, nothing. We just got to sit down and talk about it. And that's where we talk about it being an antecedent. Now, let's talk about diarrhea or constipation being a trigger. So patient comes in. Let me think about one of my patients. Okay. One of my patients comes in and is having skin rashes. And the skin rashes, we start to talk, they have a great diet, actually. Also, most of my patients are now coming in with really good diets. There's enough of my information out now that they're not coming into me with Mountain Dews and Cokes and Pepsis and stuff like that. So when I was talking to this patient, the skin issues are there, and I'm like, okay, what are you eating? Eating pretty well. Okay, how are you eliminating? I'm not. Well, why aren't you eliminating? And so we kind of get into it, and we tweak the diet a little bit there, and we increase the fiber a little bit. And as we increase the fiber, the patient's skin cleared up. So the symptom was the skin, but the trigger was the constipation. Things were backing up, and since she couldn't eliminate, then the body goes, well, what's the largest excretory organ for the human body? The skin. So when we have things backing up, the body's going to try to figure out a way to get rid of it. And so it shunted it to the skin. And so that's the same with going back to Kathy's question about gut and dementia, if things aren't moving, then it's going to start to get rid of it. And the liver will pack it away in fat. You'll start to have skin issues and those types of things. And so it's very important for this stuff to work. Now let's talk about a mediator. So the mediators and triggers can kind of be very close to each other. And in class, I sometimes have a problem with when it's the mediator and when it's the trigger. If they're just giving me a test question that says, hey, this is what we're seeing. We don't have any testing. They didn't give me a timeline. They didn't give me a matrix. So I can't really vet it out. And so that's when it gets hard for me. I'll know a little more this weekend. Everybody say a prayer for me, because I have to wake up at 2:30 in the morning for my next class, which is being given in Britain. And so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I am up at 2:30 and in class all day on British summertime, which happens to be 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But the mediator is, we can actually take that skin issue and look at somebody who, when they have a trigger cause a skin rash, then the body will get excited and start to dump. And so I haven't had anybody with constipation. Nobody jumps out in my head right off the bat with constipation as that being the mediator. You could or would assume that if mom and dad, either mom or dad, or either of the grandparents, if they had problems with IBS or those things, then things that can trigger that would be stress, and then your mediator would be your stool. And so we start to, or the mediator would be that the body is trying to clear out stuff quickly. And so as you can see, you can have one symptom that has a lot of different components to it to make it act as, well, it's a symptom, it's not the root cause. And that's what functional medicine wants to get down to. What is the root cause? Is the root cause stress causing diarrhea? Because when mom was nursing, you weren't getting what you needed because her diet was crappy and you didn't have the right gut bugs. It's very deep. It's very complex, but it's not real complicated, if you get my meaning. If you sit down with the right tools, being a matrix and a timeline, and you start to see a patient's story play out, for those of you that have gone through the functional medicine stuff with me, you know that we sit down and we try to get the story, and we just keep digging away, because once again, I am human. And if I start to do tests because I'm being pulled this way by signs and symptoms and what the patient's telling me, but the test doesn't get to the root cause, typically things get a little better, but they don't resolve. And we want that resolution. We want the ability to be able to take care of yourself. And that's what we work for. All right. So, thank you for the prayers. If there aren't any other questions, just a quick takeaway: 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. When food comes in, you should be eliminating within 30 to 45 minutes. Make sure that the stool looks appropriate. If it doesn't, start to wonder about what's going on. If you're starting to see loose, watery, think fiber. Funny enough, if you're constipated, think fiber, but also think good carbs. because you may not be powering the engine enough so that things do move through. And then if you can't resolve it within 2 to 3 days, that's when you need to speak to somebody like me that will go in and start to dig away at what's causing this issue and get it straightened out. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about, is just making sure that you guys are happy and healthy and doing well. And so if you want somebody like me to be on your team, just talk to any type of functional medicine practitioner. If you go to the Institute for Functional Medicine, ifm.org, you can look for a functional medicine practitioner near you. I am listed in that database. So if you're near me, or if you want to work virtually, ifm.org lets you see who are functional medicine doctors around you that are trained in the same type of thinking that I'm trained in. And with that being said, you all have a great day and have a great weekend.